As the sun rises on the first day of class, the students of Class E eagerly await their new homeroom teacher, Professor Gaster. The excitement is palpable, as the students are eager to see what this unique teacher will bring to their classroom. As the professor arrives, he is greeted with enthusiastic applause from the students. Gaster takes his place at the front of the room and begins his introduction, speaking in his usual enigmatic manner. Despite his unconventional teaching methods, the students find themselves drawn to his charisma and intelligence. Gaster quickly proves himself to be an excellent teacher, challenging the students to think outside the box and pushing them to excel in their studies. Meanwhile, the students continue to bond with each other, forming close friendships and developing a sense of camaraderie. Kiyotaka and Izayoi continue to lead the class academically, while Erida brings his mischievous personality to the group, always ready for a good prank. Sans and Papyrus continue to provide comic relief, entertaining the class with their antics and jokes. Shiro remains her usual stoic self, but the other students can sense her growing appreciation for her classmates and their unique talents. As the first few weeks of class pass by, the students of Class E begin to realize that they may be at a disadvantage in terms of resources and status. However, they refuse to let this hinder their academic and personal growth. With Professor Gaster's guidance, they begin to explore new avenues of knowledge and creativity, working together to solve complex problems and overcome challenges. As the midterm exams approach, the students are more determined than ever to prove themselves and climb to the top of the school. But with fierce competition from other classes, can this small group of misfits really hope to make a difference? Only time will tell in this thrilling and suspenseful tale of determination, friendship, and academic excellence. As Class E was exploring the school, they stumbled upon a heated argument between Class 1C and Class 1B. The two classes were in a heated debate about a sensitive topic, and tensions were running high. Before Class E could back away and leave the scene, a physical altercation broke out between two students from each class. The situation quickly escalated, and soon enough, other students from both classes joined in the fight. Class E stood by, watching as the brawl continued to get worse. Some members of Class E were hesitant to intervene, knowing that they were outnumbered and didn't want to get caught up in the violence. However, others, like Kiyotaka Ayanokoji and Izayoi Sakamaki, saw an opportunity to turn the situation to their advantage. They quickly assessed the situation and decided to step in, hoping to break up the fight and gain some leverage over the other classes. With their quick thinking and tactical skills, Kiyotaka and Izayoi were able to defuse the situation and stop the fight. However, the aftermath of the incident would have a lasting impact on the school, with rumors and accusations flying around about who was to blame for the altercation. As the investigation into the case of the assault incident began, Class E found themselves in the middle of a dangerous game of power and manipulation. With the stakes higher than ever before, they would need to use all their skills and cunning to stay ahead of the competition and protect their own interests. As Kakeru Ryuan's outburst continues, Class E watches from a safe distance. Gaster takes note of the situation and starts a conversation with the rest of the class. I find it interesting that Kakeru Ryuan is trying to pick a fight with everyone in sight, Gaster remarks. I wonder what his motive is? I don't think he has a motive, Izayoi chimes in, he's just an angry person. I think he's just trying to assert his dominance over the other classes, Kiyotaka adds. Sans, who had been quietly observing, finally speaks up. I don't think we should get involved in this, he says, it's not our problem. Erida, who had been listening to the conversation, nods in agreement. He's right, he says, we should focus on our own goals. Shiro, who had been lost in thought, suddenly speaks up. I disagree, she says. If we want to climb to the top of the school, we need to learn how to navigate these kinds of situations. It's important to understand the power dynamics between the different classes. As the conversation continues, Tetsuya Hamaguchi manages to calm Kakeru Ryuen down, and the two classes go their separate ways. Class E continues to walk around the school, deep in thought about what they had just witnessed. As they watched the situation unfold, Kiyotaka spoke up. Ryuen seems to be causing trouble again. He's always trying to start something, he said. Izayoi nodded in agreement. He's just trying to show off in front of his classmates. He thinks he's better than everyone else. Sans chimed in with his usual nonchalant tone. Seems like a waste of time if you ask me. We have better things to do than get into pointless arguments. Erida, on the other hand, seemed to be enjoying the chaos. This could be a great opportunity for us, he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. We could use this to our advantage. Gaster, the newest member of Class E, remained silent, observing the situation with a detached expression. However, Papyrus, his brother, couldn't help but express his excitement. I can't believe we're witnessing a real-life argument, he exclaimed. Shiro, as always, remained calm and collected. We should stay out of it, she said, her eyes scanning the scene for any potential threats. As they continued to observe, Tetsuya's attempts to defuse the situation were unsuccessful, and the argument escalated into a physical altercation. The Class E students exchanged worried glances, unsure of what to do next. Sans, Gaster, and Papyrus, dressed in clothing with a skeleton design, had enough of the escalating situation and stepped in front of Ryuen to confront him. Ryuen didn't take kindly to the interference and began making threats, causing tension to rise among the students. As the situation became more volatile, Papyrus jumped in to defend his brother Sans and defuse the situation. With his imposing figure and commanding voice, he managed to calm Ryuen down and prevent the situation from escalating further. Meanwhile, Gaster stayed back and observed the scene with a calculating gaze. He was analyzing the situation and devising a plan to ensure that Class E would come out on top in any future confrontations. As the conflict subsided, Class E discussed the events amongst themselves. Kiyotaka suggested that they needed to be more cautious in the future, as they were in a disadvantaged position compared to the other classes. Izayoi agreed and proposed that they needed to use their wits and strategic thinking to outsmart their opponents. Erida chimed in with his own ideas, suggesting that they needed to work on building relationships with other classes to gain support and influence. Shiro, on the other hand, proposed that they focus on improving their own skills and knowledge to gain an advantage. As the conversation continued, the students of Class E realized that they had a long road ahead of them if they wanted to climb to the top of the school. But with their combined intelligence and determination, they were confident that they could overcome any obstacle that came their way. Sans stood firmly in front of Ryuen, his blue hoodie and black shorts contrasting against his white skeletal features. He locked eyes with Ryuen, his usual grin replaced with a serious expression. You need to back off, he said firmly, we won't tolerate any kind of bullying in this school. Ryuen sneered, unimpressed. Who are you to tell me what to do, skeleton boy? You're nothing but a freak. Papyrus stepped forward, his tall and imposing figure casting a shadow over Ryuen. He wore a white shirt with a black necktie and black pants, and his skull-like head was adorned with a red scarf. My brother is right, he said, his voice carrying a deep and commanding tone. We won't stand for any kind of mistreatment towards our classmates. Ryuen's face twisted into a snarl, and he balled his fists up. You think you can take me on, skeleton freaks? I'll show you what real power is. Tetsuya Hamaguchi, who had been trying to defuse the situation, stepped in once more. Everyone calm down, he urged, let's talk this out and find a peaceful solution. Meanwhile, the members of Class E watched nervously, unsure of what to do. Aida Kasuga analyzed the situation, trying to come up with a plan in case things turned violent. Kiyotaka Ayanokoji observed everyone's movements, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses. Izaoi Sakamaki watched with curiosity, interested in how the situation would unfold. As the tension continued to build, it became clear that the situation was on the verge of exploding. As Ryuan swung at Tetsuya, Sans quickly reacted and tripped him, causing him to fall down the stairs. The other members of Class E watched in shock as Ryuan tumbled down, and Sans simply brushed it off, saying guess he lost his footing. Tetsuya approached Sans, a look of concern on his face. That's not the way to handle things, he said softly, we need to try and resolve conflicts peacefully. Papyrus, however, wasn't having any of it. How dare you accuse my brother of something he didn't do, he shouted at Tetsuya, his voice echoing through the hallway. You're a liar and a fraud. Tetsuya tried to defend himself, but Papyrus was too enraged to listen. Don't listen to this man, he yelled to the other students who were starting to gather around them. He makes up things about people and lies about it to others. Meanwhile, members of Class 1B had arrived on the scene. They had heard the commotion and were curious as to what was happening. However, they didn't dare get involved as they saw the tense situation between Class E and Tetsuya Hamaguchi unfold. The members of Class E remained silent, choosing to walk away from the situation rather than engage in any further conflict. It was clear that tensions between the two classes were only going to escalate from here on out. Next page, Papyrus was offended with Tetsuya Hamaguchi's statement, yelling back at him and telling him that he was wrong and a liar. Sans looked at Tetsuya Hamaguchi with a disapproving look and said, that's not the way we do things. Tetsuya Hamaguchi sighed and rubbed his temples. I know. I shouldn't have said that. It was wrong of me. Papyrus was still fuming, but he seemed to calm down slightly at Tetsuya Hamaguchi's admission. So what really happened then? He asked, still suspicious. Tetsuya Hamaguchi looked at Sans, who gave him a nod of encouragement. Okay, fine. Sans did trip Ryuan. But it was to stop him from attacking me. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. Papyrus still seemed unsure, but he didn't press the issue any further. As they walked away, Tetsuya Hamaguchi couldn't help but feel guilty. He knew that lying was wrong, but he didn't want Sans to get in trouble. As they left, more of Class 1B showed up, drawn by the commotion. Papyrus yelled out to them, don't listen to this man. He makes up things about people and lies about it to others. The Class 1B students looked at each other, unsure of what to make of the situation. Some looked sympathetic towards Papyrus, while others seemed skeptical. Class E didn't stick around to find out, though. They simply walked away, leaving the arguing students behind. Sora took a deep breath and stepped forward, putting a hand on Sans' shoulder. It's time to go back to class, he said firmly, we've made our point, and we don't want to cause any more trouble. Sans nodded, his eyes still fixed on Ryuan. You're right, he said, let's go. Papyrus followed suit, still looking angry but realizing that continuing the argument would only make things worse. We'll settle this another time, he muttered under his breath, I won't forget what he's done. As they walked away, Tetsuya Hamaguchi approached them once more. That was not the way to handle things, he said sternly. Tripping someone down the stairs is dangerous and could have caused serious harm. Sans looked down, realizing that he had acted impulsively and without thinking about the consequences. I'm sorry, he said quietly, I just couldn't stand by and watch him bully others. Tetsuya Hamaguchi nodded, his expression softening. I understand that, but there are other ways to handle these situations. Violence only leads to more violence. Papyrus spoke up, his voice still filled with anger. But he was lying, he exclaimed. Ryuan started the fight, and we had to defend ourselves. Tetsuya Hamaguchi frowned. I'll need to investigate the situation more thoroughly before making any judgments, he said, but for now, let's all go back to class and try to calm down. Meanwhile, the members of Class E had been watching from a distance, unsure of what to do. As the situation seemed to have been resolved, they slowly began to disperse, heading back to their own classes. But the incident had left a bitter taste in their mouths, and they couldn't help but feel uneasy about what was to come. Papyrus crossed his arms, staring down at Sans with an incredulous look on his face. I don't believe you, he said firmly, my brother would never trip someone like that. Sans sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm telling you the truth, bro, he said, I saw him swing at Tetsuya, and I didn't want anyone to get hurt. So I tripped him to stop the fight. Papyrus shook his head, his expression still skeptical. I don't know, he muttered, it just doesn't seem like something you would do. Tetsuya stepped forward, trying to ease the tension. It's true, he said, I saw Sans trip him to prevent any further violence. It was the right thing to do. As they continued to argue, more students from Class 1B arrived on the scene, looking concerned and confused. Sora saw this and stepped forward, trying to take charge of the situation. Everyone, calm down, he said firmly, let's all go back to our classes and talk about this calmly. Slowly, the students began to disperse, though some still looked at Sans and Papyrus with suspicion. Papyrus remained convinced that his brother was innocent, while Sans just shrugged and said it didn't matter what anyone believed. Class E walked away, their minds buzzing with thoughts and concerns about what had just transpired. Gaster walked ahead of Sans and Papyrus, leading them away from the heated situation with Ryuan and the other students. He kept a tight grip on both of their arms, making sure they followed him without any further protest. Boys, we need to calm down, Gaster said sternly, fighting with other students won't solve anything. It's better to walk away from a confrontation, even if it means letting someone else have the last word. Sans nodded his agreement, but Papyrus still seemed upset. But Dad, he protested, Sans wouldn't trip someone like that. You have to believe us. Gaster sighed, feeling the weight of the situation on his shoulders. I believe you, Papyrus, he said gently, but sometimes it's better to let things go, even if we know we're right. We don't want to make enemies or cause more trouble than necessary. As they reached their classroom, Gaster released his grip on their arms and opened the door for them. The rest of Class E was already inside, waiting for them to arrive. As they entered, the other students turned to look at them, curious about what had happened. Gaster cleared his throat, trying to appear nonchalant. Sorry we're late, he said with a small smile, we ran into some trouble on the way here. The other students exchanged glances, but didn't say anything. Class E was used to their teachers and fellow classmates getting into strange situations, so they didn't ask for any details. As they settled into their seats, Sans and Papyrus still seemed a bit tense. Gaster gave them a reassuring pat on the back before taking his place at the front of the class. He knew that this incident would weigh heavily on their minds, but he hoped that they could move past it and focus on their studies. As the night fell and the class came to an end, the students began packing up their things and heading out of the classroom. Papyrus was still muttering to himself, clearly upset and not fully convinced that Sans had tripped Ryuan. Kiyotaka Ayanokoji continued to observe the students, noting their behaviors and mannerisms. He made mental notes to himself, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses, and strategizing how he could use this information to his advantage. Izaoi Sakamaki caught Kiyotaka Ayanokoji's gaze and couldn't help but smirk. He found the idea of playing mind games with the strategic and calculating student quite amusing. Meanwhile, Sans was keeping a watchful eye on Kiyotaka Ayanokoji, sensing that he may not be entirely trustworthy. As the students filed out of the classroom, Gaster approached Papyrus and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let's go home, Papyrus," he said gently, "we'll talk about this more tomorrow." Papyrus nodded, still lost in his thoughts, and followed his father out of the classroom. Sans lingered behind for a moment, watching as Kiyotaka Ayanokoji left the room, before finally heading out himself. As they walked home, the events of the day weighed heavily on the minds of the students. They all knew that things were far from over, and that there was sure to be more drama and conflict in the days to come. Everyone was in the classroom thinking about things as it started turning into night. Papyrus was muttering, "It just can't be true. Sans would never do that." Everyone else was having side conversations. Kiyotaka Ayanokoji looked over at Papyrus, thinking he was the weak link, but getting rid of him would be very hard. He thought to himself, pondering his next move. Izaoi Sakamaki noticed Kiyotaka Ayanokoji looking over at him, but he also noticed that Sans was glaring at Kiyotaka Ayanokoji from a couple of seats behind him. As Izaoi thought, "Now, this is going to be more fun."